Good evening, fellow writers and friends. Welcome to the South Florida Writers Association's April 2022 edition of the Author Showcase Series, a virtual experience. I'm Evelyn Benson, host and producer of the videos for the Showcase Series since April 2021, and I will be introducing our featured author. But first, let me invite you to visit our website, www.southfloridawriters.org, for more information about our programs that promote literary arts and support writers, as well as membership benefits that we provide. And of course, how you can be a part of this Author Showcase series. Tonight, we will have a treat of a scintillating novel of intrigue, romance, mediumship, and the intricacies of the unseen or spiritual world by author Holly W. Schwartztol, as she presents and reads excerpts from her book, Coming Around Again. Holly W. Schwartztol is a novelist, poet, retired psychologist, and a spiritual intuitive. Her first two novels are Sherry and the Unseen World, published in 2005, and What We Tell in 2012. Her latest novel, Coming Around Again, was published in 2019. Along My Garden Path, Poems and the Rhythms of Life was published in 2020. Her poems have placed consistently for over 5 years in the Faulkner writing competition. Holly's knowledge of psychology and metaphysics informs much of her understanding of the complexities of human interaction of her characters. Typically, her fictional characters take the lead and guide her to write the story. She grew up in New York City. Her father, James Wexler, was a well-known journalist, and her mother was an attorney specializing in copyright law. Holly and her parents wrote In a Darkness, which chronicled the mental illness of her brother, Michael. Holly received her PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Miami and had a private practice of psychology for over 30 years in Miami, Florida. She has been president of many professional organizations, some of which were the Dade County Psychological Association, the Florida Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and the South Florida Writers Association. Holly lived in Miami for over 40 years, after which she moved to the Villages, Florida, for a few years. She and her husband, Robert, then moved to Cape Canaveral. Holly enjoys encouraging other writers and is a popular memoir writing teacher. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome to the virtual stage author Holly W. Schwartztol.
Hello, welcome. I'm so glad to see you all here today. And you know, we used to do this live at Books and Books. I'm sure we all miss those days, and hopefully they'll be coming back soon. But I'm just delighted to be here today. My name is Holly Schwartztol, and I'm here to talk about my latest novel, which is called Coming Around Again. So I'm going to just first give you a little bit of a synopsis of the book, and then I'm going to read some excerpts from the story. So what the book is about is that Sherry Waxman and Rosie Friedman, who were close friends, traveled together on a teen tour across the United States in 1962. And something about the tour lingers in Sherry's consciousness. For over half a century, she has searched in vain for others from the trip to resolve what it is she can't let go of. Sherry is now immersed in the study of mediumship. Rosie has lost her husband of 45 years and has come to live in the Villages, the retirement community where Sherry and her husband live. Rosie finds little comfort in Sherry's belief in the spirit world. Sherry's Aunt Geraldine, who taught them about spirituality and metaphysics when Sherry and Rosie were little girls, is also now living in the Villages. Her teachings hold one of the keys to what all must learn. Others from the past gradually emerge. Jane, in particular, harbors resentments and has a completely different take on the tour. Romance and intrigue drive the story. Sherry discovers hidden truths she'd never have imagined, and all must reevaluate their perspectives. So first, I'm just simply going to read you part of chapter 1, which is called The Train I'm On. I know you have trouble believing there is life after this one, Rosie, but if you would only read some of the books I've shown you, you know this is not all there is. Sherry, you've been harping on that so much. It doesn't help to have what you call signs from Aaron. I want him here with me now, in this lifetime. Oh, Rosie, I know, of course you do. Sherry hugged Rosie. I'm just saying it's important to know Aaron is still with you in spirit. He's always available to you, but naturally you'd rather have him here with you, I know. Sherry Waxman Goldenberg and Rosie Friedman Lang had been friends for over half a century. They'd met in preschool in New York City, but much of their adult lives they had lived far from each other. Before moving to the retirement community called the Villages in Central Florida, Sherry moved from New York to Miami, and Rosie lived in a small town in Idaho. Now here it was, 2017, and they were back together again. The two friends sat on Sherry's lanai, gazing out at the golf course. Sunlight played off the pond in the middle of the course as a few lone golfers waited to tee off in the distance. I wish I could magically bring Aaron back to you right now. I know how alone you feel without him. You know, I don't think you can fully understand what this is like for me. You've probably wondered at times what it would be like, but until it happens, you just can't fathom how horrible it is. I'm sure she's right. If something happened to Gordon, I'm sure I'd be lost too. I wish I could help Rosie feel better. It would help if she believed there are other dimensions of existence. Well, I'm glad you decided to move here so we can catch up on old times. My friends have welcomed you, and maybe because you were never here with Aaron, you don't have to be constantly reminded of what you used to do and places you went with him. You know what I mean? That's true, but at the same time, it makes me feel more lost. At home, I could still feel his presence, not in the way you describe spirits, but just the familiarity of our house and our life. And if you're right that the spirit lives on, how will Aaron find me now? Tears dripped out of Rosie's brown eyes. I'm afraid no matter where you are, you'll feel this loss. After all, you and Aaron were married for 45 years, but the spirit can find you anywhere. Well, all I know is I never for a minute realized how terrible it would be, and I wonder if I'll ever feel like my old self again. Even after 6 months, I want to dial his cell phone and tell him things. I don't know where I fit in anymore, especially because I have no history here. Yes, but that's something you have in common with every person who lives here, because everyone has retired and moved from other communities. That's one reason I suggested you move here. You know me, so you're not completely alone. I suppose I do like having so many choices here. I wish I had the strength to try more things. All my energy is involved in setting up my house. Everyone who moves to the villages focuses on their homes at first. Gordon and I did almost nothing until we got the house squared away. And you're doing such a good job, Rosie. I've always admired your sense of style. All your homes have been charming. Sherry wished Rosie attended to herself as well as she did to her house. Since Aaron died, Rosie had let her hair turn completely gray. At least she hadn't turned to food for comfort as others did, but had nearly stopped eating and looked pathetically thin. She was reluctant to comment on any of this to Rosie. Sherry kept her own monthly appointments with her hairdresser. Luckily, the Villages was a casual place where looking spiffy wasn't as much of a requirement as it was elsewhere. I never in a million years thought I'd move to Florida, that's for sure. I wouldn't have come if you hadn't insisted on my visiting you. But this is not like South Florida, thank God. At least it gets a little cold here in the winter, and it's not as completely flat as other parts of the state. I don't know if I'll stay here forever, but it's good enough for right now, I guess. Honestly, Sherry, would you ever have pictured us living in Central Florida? Absolutely not. We were dyed-in-the-wool New Yorkers, weren't we? Thought that was the only place to live. Yeah, what did we know, huh? Except for the teen tour across the United States we took in 1962. Ha, you're not kidding. We saw so many different states. It was fun, wasn't it? I sometimes wonder what happened to everyone we met on the tour. It was only 5 weeks, but it was a very intense time. We lost track of those kids after a couple of years. Sherry couldn't help wondering where they all were now and how they were doing. At least you didn't get homesick the way you did when you went to camp. Remember, you had to leave 2 camps because you were so unhappy, and your parents let you come home? Mine never would have let me. I was a little worried you'd want to bolt from the tour, too. Riding on trains and staying in nice hotels was a far cry from the bunks at camp. I loved every minute of it. There were some cute boys on that trip, too, if you recall. You had a little romance with Randy from New Hampshire, except you hated when he called you Cozy Rosie. You have the memory of an elephant. You remember the smallest little details. Yes, I hated the nickname, but Randy was okay. We had some laughs. We were only 15 after all. 15, wow, we thought we knew everything, didn't we? When you think about those kids, you have to realize they're probably nearing their 70s now. They've had lives filled with stuff like we have. I still remember the morning we met all the kids at Grand Central Station. It was late July, and the station was grimy and smelled of cigarette smoke because in those days, people smoked everywhere. Yuck, even in movie theaters. We grew up in a smoke-filled place. Yes, we did. Hard to imagine anymore. Anyway, as I was saying, it was exciting meeting those kids and getting on the train bound for Niagara Falls. I remember snippets. It was clear from the first how some were going to pair off. Remember those girls from Philly? The really cute one named Judy and her friend Steffi? The Canadian boy, what was his name? Rosie's eyes widened at the memories and said, there were 3 boys from Canada. I think you mean Nathan. He helped Judy with her suitcase and was smitten with her from the beginning. Judy was really adorable. You couldn't even resent her because she was so friendly and lively. Another Canadian we used to have long philosophical talks with. He was short and had blonde hair, and we really hit it off. Not as boyfriend and girlfriend, but as good friends. Now, what was his name? Julian, that's it, Julian Barber. He was a doll. Whenever I think about that trip, that song Arlo Guthrie sings comes to mind. Let's see. Wasn't it City of New Orleans? I remember snippets of that too. And the sons of Pullman porters and the sons of engineers ride their fathers' magic carpets made of steel, and mothers with their babes asleep, rocking in the gentle heat, and the rhythm of the rails is all they feel. Yeah, what was the refrain? Good morning, America, how are you? Say, don't you know me? I'm your native son. I'm the train they call the city of New Orleans. I'll be gone 500 miles when the day is done. I know what you mean. The clickety-clack of those old trains had a soothing quality. That was a great way to travel, and it was before anyone worried about terrorism, Rosie smiled. But some of the trains were not so nice. Remember the one from Phoenix to El Paso? No, but I'm sure you'll remind me. There was no air conditioning or electricity in our car, and it was sweltering. So a whole bunch of us stayed in the dining car until 3 a.m. I think I got about an hour's sleep that night, compounded by our trip to Juarez to see the bullfight. Rosie grinned and said, I don't know why we even had to go to such a ghoulish activity. So much pomp and circumstance and excruciating heat. We couldn't wait to get back to the train, though. On the other hand, Rosie, the dome cars we took were really fun. I wonder if those trains still exist. Those were beautiful. I guess you could say those were the good old days. Well, think about it. Kennedy was president and no one had heard of the Beatles. I think Neil Sedaka's Breaking Up Is Hard to Do was playing on the jukeboxes, or was it See You in September? It was before all those assassinations of the 60s. We were hopeful and rather innocent in so many ways. And now I will move on to chapter 2, which is not very long, and I will read it in its entirety. It's called A Visit to Geraldine. Rosie and Sherry were walking along the boardwalk in Lake Sumter Landing. Sherry loved listening to the oldies music piped in from the village's radio station. Sherry, you didn't tell me Aunt Geraldine was living here too. She must be 100 by now. She's only 82. She was my dad's little sister. I thought I told you. Anyway, she's here and she runs a mediumship study class. I've been going for years. It's so amazing to have her right here. Remember, she used to visit us in Westport in the summers, but then I hardly saw her during the winters in the city. She's been such a pivotal part of my life. Of course, there were at least 30 years when I hardly saw her, but we'd write and eventually email. She's one of the few older folks who isn't afraid of learning new things. Let's see if she's around. She doesn't mind if we just drop in. Want to? Sure, do you think she'll remember me? Of course. When I told her you were coming, she lit up and began telling me lots of things about you I'd forgotten, like how you used to have terrible hay fever in the summer, and she remembered your father. She said she always thought you were a much better friend to me than Mary. Whatever happened to Mary? I haven't heard you mention her in years. Your guess is as good as mine. I haven't heard from her in decades. She's disappeared, just the way all the teen tour kids have. It's a good thing you witnessed the past with me. Otherwise, I'd think I'd made it all up. They passed a family throwing breadcrumbs into the lake. Makes me crazy when I see that. The sign clearly says not to feed the wildlife, but there are always people doing it anyway, Sherry said, hoping her loud whisper would be heard. So if we do go see Geraldine, please don't ask her to contact Aaron. You know I don't believe in that stuff. I really don't see why. If it were me, I'd want to make contact. Just respect me on this. The only way I want to see or hear Aaron is alive. Well, don't worry. A good medium doesn't volunteer unwanted information. But I always say to people, just keep a window in your mind open a little bit. You never have to open it all the way. But if it's completely shut, you might miss something. Rosie's eyes filled and Sherry put her arm around her friend. It's okay, Rosie. You know, I just get carried away sometimes. I don't mean to push you. Are you sure you even want to go see Geraldine? Sniffling, Rosie brushed her arm across her eyes and said, yes, I always liked her. I don't have to believe everything she believes, or for that matter, what you do either. Sherry suggested Rosie leave her parked car at Lake Sumter and ride with her. Geraldine lived in a villa in the northern section of town. Large oak trees graced her house, not like the puny palms that had been hastily planted in the newer southern part where Sherry and Rosie lived. The front yard was graced by a few stone angels and wind chimes danced in the breeze. Doesn't the energy here feel good? There's a gentleness, a softness in the air. Geraldine's essence emanates. I kind of know what you mean. Sherry and Rosie stopped as they noticed several dragonflies gliding by the front door. Oh, I love dragonflies. You see, they know this is a special place too. That's a bit far-fetched, I think. Dragonflies are everywhere. No, Rosie, that's not so. I don't see them everywhere. I know others do, but I see them only when they have some sort of message for me. But let's not debate this. Then the door opened and Geraldine appeared. Her dark wavy hair was now a shimmering white, and the crinkles around her eyes and mouth had deepened a bit, but her step was sprightly and energetic. Oh, I'm so happy to see you girls again. Come right in and make yourselves comfortable. I think we don't qualify as girls anymore. We're in our 70s now, you know. I was surprised when Sherry told me you'd moved here. I wouldn't have thought you'd leave the Northeast. The three walked into the living room. Light poured in through a skylight and the floor-to-ceiling windows. Mottled sunlight shone through the trees, casting shadows across the room. Rosie and Sherry sank into seats on Geraldine's fluffy, overstuffed couch. I know what you mean. It's amazing we've all migrated to Florida, isn't it? But after all, Rosie, you moved west decades ago. Sherry told me you'd lost Aaron. I'm so very sorry, dear. Rosie averted her teary eyes. It's okay, Rosie. Geraldine understands. You don't have to hide your sadness with her. Sherry draped her arm around Rosie. Geraldine sat facing them in a high-backed upholstered chair. She leaned forward as she spoke. I certainly do understand. Perhaps you remember my dear Charles died when he was so young. I know the abject pain of widowhood. You have to find a way to reinvent yourself without your mate. It takes a long time, even when you know they are on the other side and only a thought away. Well, I've never believed any of that stuff, Geraldine, so it's even harder for me. At least you found Sherry again, and you two have such a strong friendship. Does that bring you some comfort, dear? Yeah, it does, only I wish you lived somewhere other than Florida. I've never much liked the heat and humidity, but I do kind of like it here in the villages. And I'm happy you're here. We had fun during our Westport summers. You took us to the ice cream parlor and you taught us those games. Something about holding pieces of jewelry and trying to get psychic information. Yes, Rosie. You had a particular talent for psychometry, even though you professed disinterest in metaphysics. Geraldine's eyes twinkled. We should do that again one day. Geraldine's right. Your skill was almost uncanny. And Geraldine, you taught us about how we could use white light and how to use a pendulum. Those things are much more commonplace today, especially here. But back in the 50s, concepts of metaphysics were so new. I know it seems so to you, Sherry, but really white light has been used by healers for over 5,000 years, and dowsing goes way back too. Sherry says you're teaching her mediumship. I didn't think that could be taught, that people were either born with those abilities or not. Actually, we are all born with abilities, and you're right, some people have more innate talent than others. I compare it to learning to play the piano. There are child prodigies, but most people can learn to play if they have the interest and if they practice. You're welcome to come to my class and experience it for yourself. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe Rosie will find out she's a medium herself. She's always poo-pooing me, but maybe, guess I can dream. I doubt I'll come, but thanks for asking. Geraldine winked at Sherry. Well, I'm not about to pressure you about learning mediumship, but perhaps you'll come to class and let the students practice their skills. Isn't it easier for us to practice with people who are open to all this, Aunt Geraldine? Yes, and it's especially meaningful sometimes to work with skeptics. Rosie, why don't you come and observe a class? Yeah, Sherry chimed in. Maybe if you witness a class, you'd feel differently. Anyway, the sessions are fun. Please come. Rosie sighed and said, maybe I'll come. What could it hurt? So now I'm going to go to chapter 7, where a new character is introduced. And this chapter is called Angry Jane. Jane Purkell sifted through the coupons on her kitchen table. She hadn't bothered to get dressed, even though it was nearly 2 p.m. Her gray hair hung limply around her face, her mouth set in a tight grimace. Her thoughts were filled with hopelessness. What's the use of these dumb so-called savings? What do I need to go out for anyway? I might as well just order stuff on my computer. Jane grabbed the last bag of chocolate chip cookies and meandered over to her desk. The piles of magazines she'd promised to read someday dated back nearly 2 years. Old diaries and scrapbooks leaning against one wall. Jane always thought she'd write a book someday, so she kept memorabilia. Her son Peter cautioned her, saying she'd likely attract bugs, or worse yet, set a fire one day with all the musty old things she was holding on to. Fine for him to say, what does he know about why I keep those things? I need them to remind myself how I once had something of a life. Or did I? Seems I've spent so much time hoping for a life, and now here I am nearly 70, and what do I have to show for myself? Oh, sure, I have Peter. At least I produced a son, but why have I been alone so much of my life? Everyone ignores old Jane. Well, for that matter, everyone ignored me when I was younger, too. Can't count those few lousy so-called friends in high school. Long hallways came to mind. Jane had been painfully shy and hardly anyone paid attention to her. She'd been a middling student. She got by. Maybe if I'd been more of a hellraiser, someone would have taken an interest in me, but I wasn't, and they didn't. Jane's fantasies were filled with anger and resentment, but she knew how to smile and make nice. No one knew how she had dreamed of shoving popular Joni down the stairs. Even the summers were crummy. My parents tried to get me to make friends, even sent me on a posh teen tour around the country. What another laugh. Hardly anyone on the dumb trip included me in their activities. I was just shunted aside, plain Jane. Jane tried to remember the names of the kids on the tour. Maybe she could Google them. Boy, wouldn't it be fun to find all those creepy kids again? I wonder what they're up to now. I bet they don't even remember me at all. They hardly noticed me then, over half a century ago. What were their names? Cherry or Shelley? Oh, yes, now I remember. Sherry Waxman and her cohort. Now let me think, was it Violet or Iris? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know, Rosie. Yeah, Sherry and Rosie. They were the ringleaders. Sherry's friend Julian was slightly friendly, but those girls, they were just like the girls in high school, all caught up in their own little worlds, barely inviting me to any of their outings. Boy, wouldn't Sherry be surprised to know her Sheldon married me? Met him again in college, only he was such a disappointment as a husband. It's a miracle I conceived Peter, considering how inattentive Sheldon was. One more huge disappointment. Jane was rather grateful for the internet. At least she could pretend to be busy. And she enjoyed snooping around and finding out things about people. She liked the criminal background check sites. Jane didn't even mind paying for these services. It felt good to discover those little details of people's lives they felt were private. Sometimes Jane fancied herself a private investigator. She just didn't have any real cases and no one paid her. In high school, Jane peeked inside the teachers' grade books, and sometimes she hunted through the trash for the little notes kids wrote to each other. Most of those were scrunched up, but Jane was able to stuff them into her book bag and then unfold them in the privacy of her bedroom. Reading the notes made Jane feel important and part of things. I guess I was the original bag lady, Jane mused. She stared out the window. Temperatures were plummeting in recent days, and the darkening late afternoon sky hung ominously. Autumn leaves were losing their vibrancy, turning dull shades of brown. Lights from houses across from hers suggested families and holiday parties, deepening Jane's sense of isolation. She shivered, reaching for an Afghan. Peter kept entreating his mother to get a puppy, but Jane didn't want the responsibility. You need something to come home to, Ma. You can't just sit around all day by yourself. You used to love animals. Why don't you go over to the pound and find a little dog? Sure, so I can get all attached and then have the blasted thing die on me like the last time. Oh no, I'm not falling into that trap again. My luck, the dog would have some weird quirk and run up veterinarian bills. Nothing ever goes right for me. I'm not getting any damn pet. Just stop trying to fix me. I don't want any more animals slobbering around here. Then maybe you need to go away on a trip. Why don't you visit your sister in New Mexico? I'll think about it. Peter's suggestions were of no help. Jane hadn't been west of the Mississippi since 1962, the year she'd gone on the teen tour. Something about the tour made her uneasy. I can still hear the clickety-clack of those endless train rides and the stuffiness when the air conditioning broke down in the Southwest. I don't want to go back to New Mexico. And it's not as if my sister has invited me anyway. What am I supposed to do? Just call her and invite myself? I don't think so. Jane wasn't much of a traveler. Sheldon took her to the Caribbean once. Those balmy days and nights briefly soothed her. But even then, Jane knew her marriage was a sham. She married Sheldon because it was expected of young women in the late 1960s. She had the requisite baby too, but mothering was overwhelming for her. The baby cried all the time, and Jane had no emotional support. Besides, she didn't want to appear needy. Her mother always told her to put on a nice face and keep her troubles to herself. Everyone else knew what to do, and Jane wasn't about to appear insecure if she could help it. Sheldon was little help. He didn't understand why she complained with just one little baby at home. Maybe I should call Dr. Mitkin and have a few sessions with her. I do like talking to her, but really, what's the point? Thank God Medicare covers the sessions. Only last time I went there, she kept insisting I go on an antidepressant. I'm not about to do that. Not after Mary Linwood, just a few weeks on those poisons, and she went and killed herself. They even tell you on television the drugs can make you suicidal. I'm depressed, but I'm not looking to die. So nope, no fancy pills for me, just to keep the pharmaceutical companies happy. Big Pharma sure has put one over on us. The few friends Jane had found little time for her these days. She didn't understand why it was that when she occasionally opened up with people about her feelings, they pulled away from her. In books she read, friends confided in each other and got closer. But when Jane tried sharing her troubles, people faded away from her. Dr. Mitkin told her it was because she told too much too fast and inundated potential friends. But Jane didn't see what she meant. Whatever the reasons, Jane's isolation intensified over the years. She did enjoy needlepoint. She loved the symmetry of pulling the needles through fabric. Her house was filled with little homespun pillows of birds and sayings. Her walls sported needlepoint artistry. Mitkin thought she should enter her pieces in local art shows, but Jane had been too timid. Plus, she felt what she did wasn't really art because she was just filling in the designs others had produced, almost like painting by numbers. Jane worried about losing cognitive abilities as she aged, so she became quite addicted to online sites, promising to keep her mind active. Only Jane wasn't content with just completing the prescribed games. She'd compulsively play certain games for hours on end, pursuing perfection. The games provided a sense of busyness and purpose. She never talked about them with Mitkin. She didn't want to give up the games. Even her Facebook page was stark. She refused to friend people just to look popular. What a laugh those friends are. How can you have 1,000 friends? She'd originally signed up just to spy on Peter, so even if he didn't call her too often, she'd have an inkling of his activities. Only over the years, observing his full life made Jane feel even more disconnected. Sometimes she felt as if she were watching herself, as if some cotton batting kept her from being fully present in the moment. Mitkin called it depersonalization. Well, you have there quite a taste of the book as it begins. Of course, it goes into much more as the story continues and more people from the tour materialize. And so I would like to talk just a little bit about my writing process. People usually ask me about that when I have these live chats. So for this book, I did go on a teen tour in 1962. I have been looking for the people. And I did live in the villages for about 6 years. I do study mediumship and psychic abilities, and I have for about 30 years with a host of different teachers, Louise Houck, Hans Christian King, all sorts of people. And I'm still studying, but now I'm actually beginning to practice with clients. In general, my books are character driven. The characters lead me to discover what the plot should be, rather than the other way around. And all of my novels take place in places that I've actually lived. So my first book, which was called Sherry and the Unseen World, and if you read that, by the way, you get to read about Sherry and Rosie in their youth. That one took place in Westport, Connecticut. The next one is called What We Tell, and that took place in Miami. It's about 3 psychologists living in Miami who have a lot of secrets. And then, and then the next one, this one, Coming Around Again, took place in the villages. Where I live now, I'm very happy. So I hope I'm afraid to write a book because I don't want to move. I do have also a book of poems called Along My Garden Path. That is pretty much what I have to say. And I just want to also say that, you know, they say you write what you know. So there's little grains of truth all through these books. And people are always saying, oh, isn't that you? Or is that so-and-so? And of course, everybody's a composite. They're all fictionalized. Anyway, my books are available at Books and Books in Miami at the Sunnyland store. At least this new one is, and I think they may still have a couple of the other books. You can buy it online at Amazon. It's available in Kindle and in paperback. And I love hearing from people after you read my stories. And sometimes people even call me or contact me while they're in the middle of it. And I love that, you know, I love talking about the characters and so forth. And so you can reach me at hollyschwartztol@gmail.com. And as I said, I love hearing reactions people have to the book. The only other thing that I did want to share with you, but I'm not sure. Oh yeah. It's gotten some nice reviews on Amazon, and I just wanted to read one. The idyllic life for them in the villages is vividly described. Another member of the tour surprisingly reconnects with them. Her negativity sabotages her ability to adjust to retirement until she finds purpose and a direction in life. Perceptions they have of each other when they were younger remain until shattered and changed. Other members of the tour surface and each confront their own past, rebuild and heal their relationships. The healing path in the story is about breaking down barriers, the evolution of friendships, finding different ways to love, and the power of connections and spirituality. The compelling descriptions of the path may challenge the reader's preconceived notions. And then she says it's a good read for baby boomers and anyone curious about spirituality and healing. So I thank you for watching this, and I hope that I will hear from you. And thank you so much. And thank you to the South Florida Writers Association for providing this opportunity, and also to Books and Books.